I mean, I can understand why many Hong Kongers are like attracted by Milton Keynes. I mean, it is a purpose-built satellite town to support commuters going into London. So in a way, Milton Keynes is very much like our own, Tsuen Wan, Sha Tin.
上一集我哋帶大家去過倫敦熱門香港人會落腳嘅地點嘅 High Street 視察過行程，睇下究竟條街究竟係點樣啦。咁亦都了解過喺英國做生意究竟要了解啲乜嘢。不過喺做生意之前，咁梗係要穩打穩紮，落咗腳先啦。
英國地大物博，東南西北嘅面貌咧，同埋生活都完全唔一樣啊！而英港人去揀落腳地嘅時候，相信好多人都會揀大城市，因為可能係工作機會比較多，容易啲適應啩。
有人就會揀衛星城市咁樣嘅，好似 Milton Keynes 咁樣啦。近倫敦之餘，亦都自成一國，都係幾好嘅選擇嚟㗎。
至於英國小鎮村落嘅生活係點樣呢？定居又係咪真係咁容易呢？我哋今集去 Cambridgeshire。
根據 Fowler 所講，英國冇教堂嘅小村落就叫做 Hamlet， 之後升一級就係 Village。
Villages usually will have a church, so they'll have a village church. Quite often the village will also have a pub, though again,increasingly that isn't the case. Certainly many villages now no longer can support a pub. Quite often it would have its own little convenience store. Certainly in sort of traditionally there would be a little common area, usually a duck pond, for the keeping of ducks. So the village has that sort of very small beginnings of, you can say, sort of community buildings.
再具規模啲就係 town 啦，你會諗起邊一個鎮仔呢？
Kingston upon Thames，
我就諗起 Windsor。
I think most of the towns in the UK, certainly the historic towns, are either related to an institution, so they may be related to a place where there was an ecclesiastical institution, an abbey or a monastery, for example, or...And this is most of them, or they're market towns, which were basically, they're like large villages that had a license from the king or from the government to be able to hold a market. So, people in all the nearby villages, they would be able to come into the market to sell their wares.
升多級就係城市啦，升格條件係地方可以展示文化歷史同埋皇室聯繫。仲要說服到點解值得升喎。已故女王伊麗莎白二世在位白金禧就將8個地方升格做城市，現時英國城市已經發展到76個，意想不到係連 Ely 都係城市。
Most places that have a cathedral, for example, are called cathedral cities. They have a charter defining them as a city, but some of them can be actually quite small. Quite close to where I live is a cathedral city called Ely, and Ely is basically a town. You wouldn't think of it in common parlance as being a city, but it is technically a city because it has this charter to be a city. If I was to compare sort of British cities with sort of Hong Kong, I would say you have London, which is a very established, huge international city, not really comparable to Hong Kong, but both Birmingham and Manchester were essentially large industrial cities that grew up, in the 19th and early 20th century. But many of the other places, Bristol's a beautiful city, Bath is beautiful as well, but they are much, much smaller than Hong Kong.
倫敦大西北 Milton Keynes 發展咗超過50年，今年終於獲升格做城市。
I mean, I can understand why many Hong Kongers are like attracted by Milton Keynes. I mean, it is a purpose-built satellite town to support commuters going into London. So in a way, Milton Keynes is very much like our own, Tsuen Wan and Sha Tin. I mean, the model of developing Sha Tin and Tsuen Wan actually came from, what the British were doing with towns like Milton Keynes. So Milton Keynes is, purposely designed, to be sort of spacious. It's purposely designed to have, I think, a lot of the facilities which we would expect to find in a new town in Hong Kong. I mean, for me, Milton Keynes isn't the type of town I would be naturally interested in going. I mean, I think there's a lot of people in the UK that don't particularly like Milton Keynes because they think it lacks a bit of character. It doesn't have sort of the historic roots that other towns have.
我哋一齊走入 Fowler 嘅 Village Life 啦。
45萬磅4房。Should we buy it?
It depends on what you like. I don't know where Westbury Road is. One of the big divisions that you see in Britain is between sort of the north and the south. And the south tends to be, economically a lot more prosperous. If you look at property prices, I mean, property prices in the north are a fraction of what they are in the south. Living costs, it's interesting. It's worth remembering that, most people will buy most of their daily necessities from supermarkets. Whether you're in the north or whether you're in the south, if you go to a supermarket, it's the same price, essentially. When it comes to sort of, eating out and rental costs, again, land prices, property prices, the cost of setting up a business, the north is really quite markedly cheaper than it is in the south. And how many toys did you get that you ate through? He's very diligent. You're such a chewer, Mr. Morgoy.
I can hear you now.
Good. I've got you the answers to those questions you were asking.
That needs to have a good pair of boots.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean necessarily an expensive pair of boots, but these are sort of old Dunlop.
And this
boots.
originally, this is the boot room.
So this little room here, you come out, you come in from the yard, and you can dry your feet off, throw your boots here, and before you go into the house. And usually, you'll have your jackets. So it's summertime now, so we don't need that. You would have your big jackets hanging here, which you put on before you go out. One other thing which is really lovely. So I love dogs, and we have little Rollo, and when we get post, so the postman sort of comes in, drives in, and Rollo knows sort of all the postmen around here. So Rollo will run over to say hello, and quite often, the post people they go out on their rounds with dog biscuits. So when they meet friendly dogs, they come over to say hello and things, and he gets a dog biscuit. So he sort of waits here for his dog biscuit from them. Actually, she's a post lady, but she's very nice too. It's important to remember that Hong Kong actually it's not only a safe city. I mean, it's one of the safest cities in the world. Partly it's also because it's heavily policed. I mean, it has Hong Kong, for its size, has an enormous sort of police presence. Britain isn't as safe as Hong Kong. You have a lot of crime, obviously associated with rougher parts of Britain, where I think people are sort of struggling to survive, and perhaps there's less opportunities. In the cities, there are certainly crime gangs that are operating, but there are other parts of the UK where things are actually extremely safe. Again, in much of the sort of prosperous south, it's not uncommon for people to still feel that they can head out and in their village it's still relatively safe. They're not too worried about having to lock the doors.
It's called an honesty thing. So what I do is I'll put £1. Keep them. So got some pears here. Fancy a pear?
Yeah, quite fresh. Isn't it fresh?
係啊，新鮮嘅。
I've got one spare, not for you, but you're not.
得唔得？
甜，好甜。
Not for you.
Very common for people to sort of pick things from their garden and to just sort of leave it out on a tray for people to help themselves, or to have an honesty box. They're not worried about someone coming over and stealing the money box from the table. So certainly in many parts of the UK, it is still a safe enough community for people to do that, for people to sort of behave in that way. A very common thing in the UK is also for just in case you're worried about being away or something, you would give a spare key to your neighbour. That's a very normal thing, which again, it suggests that there's enough trust in the community to say, I'm very happy for my neighbour to have the spare keys, to have access to my home. So, there is crime, but I don't think the crime that we see in certain parts of the UK is necessarily sort of defining society and making society less trustworthy.
I think there was probably a pigeon that met his demise over there in the evening. So you get a lot of wildlife, a lot of foxes and deer and all sorts of things coming in. That looks as though it was a pigeon taken by a fox. So this is the crime scene. The other thing you learn about when being in the country is you become sort of more appreciative of nature, but at the same time perhaps less sort of squeamish. I mean, you also every spring we have birds, usually sort of large blackbirds that they all build their nest on the chimney of the house. And the sad thing is, of course, there's a certain time of the year when the baby birds leave the nests and venture out to try and fly, and a lot of them don't make it. So you see a lot of injured little baby birds with broken wings and things. I usually get a call from the wife saying, Evan, come downstairs, and there's the dog with the little baby bird in his mouth. He hasn't bitten it, so he's just holding it. Of course, you have to go and take the little bird out, and I sadly usually sort of let them go into the field.
英國除咗有南北之分，亦都劃分咗4個組成國。喺體育盛事上面，就特別體現到大家嘅身份認同啦。
You also have a divide in a way between the nations. The United Kingdom, Britain, of course, is the island, but the United Kingdom is a union of kingdoms, and you have sort of Scotland is essentially practicing one country, two systems. Heard that before somewhere, but Wales is also has its own devolved assembly. Most of its sort of domestic legislation is really sort of set aside for the Welsh to deal with, and I think it's important to understand that different parts of the UK have, they can have sort of a very strong local identity. So the Scots have their identity. Within Scotland, there's a breakdown of identities between the Lowland Scots and the Highland Scots. Within Britain, you have the people of Yorkshire. So Yorkshiremen supposedly, they're very straight talking. They're very hard working. They really have sort of pride in sort of seeing themselves as being different. And then in the very far west, you have the Cornish. It's interesting that Cornwall, being the very, very southwest of Britain, historically there was a lot of mining that went on in Cornwall and in the very extreme southwest. Those have all closed now, and really it gets by through sort of tourism. It's a beautiful place, by the way, to go and visit Cornwall. A lot of wealthy people have their holiday homes down in Cornwall, so it is a lovely place. But again, it's a place where there is a lot more poverty down there too.
One thing that's been quite surprising has been, I know many Hong Kongers, including people in Hong Kong, we would probably refer to them as Thais, who have come to the UK and they've fallen in love with gardening. So it's wonderful, when you're talking to someone who in Hong Kong just seemed to live a life of luxury, and then they sort of come over here and suddenly it's almost like their perspective changes, because I think with gardening you're working with your hands, you're getting dirty, but quite often a lot of the other work that we have to do is very stressful. It's very, we can get very caught up in it, and being able to come out and do some gardening, I think, is actually a wonderful way of calming down.
Have
a look at, we've got some beef brisket, also roasted up there in a bun. We've got a steak and ale pie, which is sort of very traditional. And then we've got sort of dirty fries here, so with some pulled pork and cheese, and so that's sort of quite modern food. So in many ways, I think, like pulled pork here, I think mostly associated with southern states of the US. But it's something that people like, and it's become something embraced by the British.
至於大家都要面對嘅冬季抑鬱，Fowler話移民英國之後首個冬天實在好難捱嘅，稍為微調心態之後呢，就好有信心可以捱過未來嘅寒冬。
It gets dark at 3:30 in December. It's cold. It's often it doesn't necessarily rain a lot, but it's often very damp. So it can feel very, very depressing because winter is so dark, because winter is so difficult to get through. When spring arrives, when you have the colour coming through in spring, it just makes spring all the more magical. It makes you appreciate all the other seasons all the more. In Hong Kong, we're sort of used to not having seasons in the same way that we do here. But if you make these small little adjustments, you begin to sort of, find comfort even in the midst of winter, because you're looking forward to spring, and spring will be there, and spring will be ever more beautiful.
你唔要講一兩句廣東話？
要啊，
試下咯。
So Evan, where are you now and where are we heading?
So we've just left home. So we're now in a part of Cambridgeshire where I live, and we're heading to a town called St Ives. So these are called pork scratchings. It's basically Jupé, but it's like a UK style, British style Jupé. As opposed to just having the skin, it also includes like a layer of fat. It's fried, it's sort of seasoned and fried, and it's particularly associated with like the Midlands in the UK. But you shouldn't eat too much. They're extremely high in cholesterol. Not very good for you, but they taste really nice. So as a little snack to have occasionally as a treat.
一連3集 ExchangeBiz 特約咧已經係順利播出啦，希望我哋呢一啲資訊咧能夠幫助大家去更加了解全面啲了解英國呢個地方啦。
咁啊，最後啦都非常之多謝 ExchangeBiz 俾咗好多空間我哋去創作節目嘅內容啦。咁啊，希望我哋可以好快再合作。
好啦，最後多謝大家收睇 Vlog咪，下集再見，拜拜。